Second homily, the Apostles' vocation. Paul attests to our greatness, refutes our evasions. So what is man? How far does the nobility of our nature go? What perfection is she capable of? To all these questions it is Paul, of all men, who has given the best answer. And here he is today, standing upright, with his whole life behind him. He speaks with a loud voice in the face of all the detractors of the human being, and he justifies the Lord, he exhorts them to perfection, he shuts the impudent mouth of the blasphemers. He shows them that from man to angels the interval is not so great if we want to be vigilant with ourselves. Because he did not share a nature other than ours. He was not attributed a soul different from ours, he did not inhabit a world other than ours. No, he grew up on the same land, in the same country, subject to the same laws and the same customs as others, and he has surpassed all men since there have been men. So where are those who claim that perfection is difficult, its opposite easy? Paul, in fact, proclaims against them. The tribulations of the moment are light and give, beyond all measure, their weight of glory for eternity. If therefore the tribulations of the kind he experienced are light, how much less weight must the pleasures that have their roots in us weigh? An indefatigable momentum, an unshakable joy. We have, no doubt, a first reason to admire him. Ardent as he was, with this overabundance, he did not feel the pain he was going to achieve perfection, but we have another one, which is that he was not pushed by the bait of a reward when he tended to that end. However, the rest of us, no matter how much we are offered a salary, we can't bear to spend ourselves to get there. He loved this perfection, he was happy with it, even independently of any reward, and everything that passes for being an obstacle, he jumped over it with total ease. Without attacking the weakness of his body, nor to the affairs that beset him, nor to the imperious necessities of nature, or to anything else. And yet, laden with heavier cares than generals and kings have, all of them, he was every day in the fullness of his strength, and however the dangers increased, he presented himself with an energy renewed. It breaks out in these words, without thinking about the path I have behind me, I am all strain to move forward. If he saw death approaching, he called to share with him the joy he expected from it. Be full of joy, be full of my joy. If he saw the perils, the outrages like any kind of contempt falling on him, he leapt for joy. On the contrary, he wrote to the Corinthians, therefore I delight in outrages, distresses and persecutions. Contrary behavior. All these trials for him were the weapons of justice, the way, precisely, he demonstrated, to pick the most beautiful fruits. And thus his enemies could not overcome them in any way. Whipped, insulted everywhere, outraged, like a triumphant with all his procession and all the trophies he raised above all the earth. He gloried, giving thanks to God in these terms, let us give thanks to God who always makes us triumph. What he was looking for was to be treated without consideration. It was the outrages that the proclamation of the message earned him, and he was looking for them with more force than we, the rest of us, will pursue honors. He ran after death more than us after life, after poverty more than us after wealth, after pain more than us after rest. What am I saying? More, infinitely more. He ran more after affliction than others after joy. He finally sent up more prayers for his enemies than others send down curses on them. He reversed the order of things. Or rather it was we who reversed it, and it was he who maintained it as God had established it. On his side, indeed, was the natural order of things, on the other the contrary order. The proof? It was Paul himself who, although he was a man, attached himself more to that order than to this one. For him, only one thing to fear, only one thing to avoid, was to go against God, and nothing else. And conversely, only one thing to be desired, and nothing more, was to please God. And I am not speaking only of the goods of this world, but even of the goods of the world to come. Don't come and talk to me about cities, peoples, kings, military expeditions, arms, wealth, provinces to govern, principalities, all that weighed no more for him than a canvas of spider. But add to all this the goods of heaven themselves, and then you will see his violent love for Christ. A violent love for Christ. Compared, indeed, to this seduction of Christ, neither the dignity of the angels, nor that of the archangels, nor any privilege of the same order seemed to him admirable. For it was in his own person that he possessed the good superior to all others, without exception, the love of Christ, and with this love he considered himself happier than anyone. Deprived of this love, he cared very little about being the very number of powers, the number of thrones and dominations. He preferred to be in the back ranks knowing the love of Christ, or among individuals who were the object of snubs, rather than to be deprived of this love and to be counted among the people filled with honors, at the very top of the social ladder. One and only form of indignity, in his eyes, to be deprived of the love of Christ. That was Gehenna for him, that was torture, and that was worth every imaginable evil, and conversely, the only enjoyment was to know the love of Christ. This is what was life and what was worth the world. This is what was worth the condition of the angels, and the goods of this world and the next. This is what was worth royalty, the promises that we have received, and every good imaginable. All the rest, all that did not lead to this love could not awaken, according to him, the slightest sadness, the slightest joy. He looked at all visible things as weeds doomed to rot. Princes, indomitable peoples weighed no more, in his eyes, than gnats, death, torture, punishments of all kinds, children's games, except to endure them because of Christ. Then, these very trials he welcomed them with joy, and his chains became his adornment. And one saw him prouder than Nero himself of the crown he wore. Locked up in his prison, he lived in heaven itself. Lashes, wounds, he received all this with more joy than a winner his prize. I would even add that the fatigues undergone had no less value for him than the rewards, as long as he regarded the fatigues themselves as a reward. So he called them a grace. So look at things closely. The price was to set sail for the next life and to dwell with Christ. Abiding in the flesh was the proposed trial in this life. And yet, it is the test that he prefers to the prize, it is that which has priority for him. To be rejected far from Christ, as an object of a curse, that was the test, that was what was painful. That was even what went beyond any test, beyond any pain. To be with Christ is the reward. But he prefers trial to reward, because of Christ. Perhaps, you will say, it was a joy to him. As long as it was for Christ? Yes, that's what I too support. Where we see an opportunity to lose heart, he, precisely, found the source of great joy. Torments and tears. Need I recall the perils he faced, and all the rest of his tribulations? For he did not lack subjects for discouragement. Doesn't he say, "Who is weak without me being weak? Who comes to stumble without a fire burning me?" We can always say, apart from that, that even despair is accompanied by a certain sweetness. Many parents who have lost their child, as soon as they are allowed to abandon themselves to their lamentations, don't they find relief there, and if they are prevented from doing so, don't they continue to suffer? Paul, too, weeping by day, weeping by night, found relief in these tears. And it's true that he was crying, because no one has ever lamented his fate so much as Paul over that of others. What feelings, tell me, could have been his, when, at the sight of the Jews who were lost, and to see them saved, he only wanted one thing, to be excluded from celestial glory? Obviously, what tormented him much more was that the Jews were not saved, otherwise he would not have expressed this wish. He made the choice that relieved him the most and gave him more peace of mind. And note that it was not just a wish, since he exclaims, "I feel sadness and pain in my heart." This man, therefore, who every day of his life suffered, if I may say so, for all the inhabitants of the earth, and for all peoples, without distinction, for all cities, and for each man in particular. To what could we compare it? An extraordinary temper. What kind of iron? What kind of diamond? What words characterize a personality of this caliber? Would you say it was iron? Diamond? For it was stronger than any kind of diamond, and more precious than gold, more precious than precious stones. For it surpassed the robustness of one and the value of the others. So, what to compare it to? To any of the materials that exist. But suppose that gold becomes diamond and diamond gold, we would manage, in a certain way, to see the desired image there. However, what do I have to do with a comparison with gold and diamonds? Put the whole world in front of Paul and you will see that his personality will tip the balance in his favor. For what he himself affirms of the men who have shone under their sheepskin, withdrawn into their caves, considered nothing in this world, we too can take up with regard to him, and even more justly. He alone was worth all creation. If therefore the world is not worth it, who will be worth it? The sky perhaps? But the sky itself is a small thing. For if he valued the love of the Lord more highly than the heavenly condition and all that is in heaven, how much the Lord, whose goodness exceeds that of Paul, as much as it is superior to evil, will estimate it at a price higher than all imaginable heavens? For the Lord does not love us according to the same measure that we love him, but according to such a superior measure that even language cannot give us the image of it. See, in any case, of what favors the Lord judged him worthy, even before the future resurrection. He took him to paradise, he led him to the third heaven, he gave him to be associated with secrets about which no human creature has the right to say a word. Emulator of angels. Favors amply justified. For Paul came and went in this world, but he accomplished everything there as if he were evolving among the angels. He might be bound to a perishable body. We recognized in him their unmixed nature. He might be subject to all the constraints that weigh on us. He aspired not to show himself inferior to the celestial powers. He traveled the world in all directions as if he had been endowed with their wings. He despised fatigue and perils as if he had no body. He looked down on the realities of this earth as if he enjoyed already from the life in heaven. He remained continually on the alert as if he dwelt in the very midst of incorporeal powers. And yet, if it is true that such and such nations have often been entrusted to the care of angels, not one was the steward of the nation entrusted to his custody as Paul was of all the earth. And do not tell me that Paul was not the real steward. I admit it too. But even if it was not he himself who brought things to fruition, in any case he is far from being excluded from our praise. Since he had made himself worthy of the considerable grace bestowed on him. Michael was entrusted with the Jewish people, Paul, him, the earth and the sea, the inhabited regions and the deserted countries. Oh, far be it from me to insult the angels by saying that. Rather, I would like to show that it is possible, any man that one is, to associate with the angels and stand by their side. But why, you will say, was this universal mission not entrusted to them? To deprive you of any means of excusing your indolence. To deprive your drowsiness of the means of sheltering behind the difference in nature with the angels. Not to mention that his titles to our admiration only became greater. Isn't it admirable? Isn't it prodigious to see a word springing from a mouth steeped in mire to put death to flight, erase sins, straighten our mutilated nature and make the earth heaven? When am I gripped by the power of God? When am I in awe of Paul? It is by noting what immense grace he received, and to what extent he was willing to accept it. Admiration for him, emulation with him. It is not only to admire him that I urge you, it is to imitate him, too, he the model par excellence of a perfect life. This is the way that will allow us to share the same crowns as him. And if you are surprised at the idea that by bringing together the same merits as him you will obtain the same rewards, listen to him. He tells you himself, I fought the good fight to the end. I finished the race, I kept the faith. Now the crown of justice is there, reserved by the Lord who will give it to me, he the just judge on that day, and not only to me, but to all those who have been stretched out in love towards its manifestation. You see how he urges all men to share the same rewards. If therefore they are equally offered to all, without distinction, let us all burn to deserve the goods which are promised to us. And let us not only look at the greatness and weight of his merits, let us also look at the vigor, the energy which drew upon him such grace, and let us not forget our common nature with him, for he shared it in everything with us without exception. So acquiring these merits, which is quite difficult, will seem easy to us, and after having given ourselves trouble for such a short time, in this world, it is with this incorruptible and immortal crown that we will live there, forever, by the grace and mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the power, now and always, and forever and ever. Amen.